You're not here to witness thunder, not tonight. You're here to listen to the kind of stories that never made it into statues, never echoed in temples. In Greek mythology, there were loves that shaped mountains, moved stars, sparked wars. But there were others, softer ones, the ones barely spoken of, forgotten in the folds of time, quiet loves, lost glances, promises whispered at twilight. The gods lived forever, but their hearts were often fragile. Some loves became myths. Others became shadows. Tonight we drift into those shadows. No drama, no glory. Just quiet devotion. A goddess waiting by the sea. A mortal who sleeps forever. A flower blooming where someone fell. Let the room dim. Let your thoughts settle. As you listen, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. If these forgotten hearts speak to yours, a like or a subscribe helps others find their way here. But no pressure. We ask for nothing. Just your breath and a little time. Now close your eyes and listen carefully. The forgotten loves of Olympus are stirring again. Very quietly. Far beyond the edge of every known shore, past where the last ships turned back and the stars no longer guided, there was a place the maps forgot. A garden suspended in hush. The air there never shouted. It shimmered quietly. Not with the bright gold of Apollo's sun, but with something softer, the color of goodbye. That was where Hesperus lived. She was not the boldest of the Hesperides. She did not sing loud enough for mortals to hear. She did not stand guard over mythic fruit or weave spells into ivy. Her task was gentler. She stood still, always at the edge. A silhouette among silent trees, watching the sky slowly fold from blue to violet. And each evening, as the first star shimmered into view, she would whisper a name not to anyone beside her, but to the sky itself. Eosphoros, the morning star. He never answered. Eosphoros was the light before dawn. He lit the horizon while the garden still dreamed. His brilliance was soft and fleeting, the faint silver that crept across the world just before the sun woke. By the time Hesperus opened her eyes, he was already gone. And yet, she waited, every night, her palms resting together, her eyes searching the east, her breath quiet, steady. They were lovers, but not in the way stories tell. They shared no embraces, exchanged no vows. They never touched. They never even saw each other. Their love was built from moments that almost happened. A glint of light on a leaf. The way dew felt warmer one morning than the last. The feeling of something familiar that couldn't be explained. Each night, Hesper stood among trees that rustled like soft sleep, listening. Not for words, but for warmth. Sometimes she would find a petal on the ground fresh, not yet browned, like a gift left by accident. Other times, she'd watch the clouds part in just the right way, as if someone had reached through the sky to clear her view. And maybe, in the hours before dawn, Eosphoros did the same. Maybe he looked west and wondered why the wind felt like a sigh. Maybe the stars lingered a moment longer for him too, as if they were reluctant to part. Maybe he felt the absence, even without knowing her name. The stories do not remember them. There are no temples to this love, no hymns sung, no altars built. But in the quiet between night and morning, there is something. A hush. A space where two lights almost meet. Where longing becomes its own kind of devotion. And perhaps that is a kind of eternity. Two souls forever rising and fading. Never touching. Yet never forgetting. Tonight, as you lie in bed, your room hushed and your breath steady, imagine her. A figure in the distance where the sky turns dark blue. Still watching. Still waiting. Still whispering a name into the silence, hoping that just once, the light will return her gaze. Love, in its deepest form, does not always shout. Sometimes it only waits. Sometimes it becomes the shape of a life, the rhythm of a breath, the quiet choice to keep hoping no matter how many nights pass unanswered. And so, Hesperus remains. In the folds of forgotten myths, in the quiet glow on your bedroom wall, in the pause before sleep takes you fully. Look there gently. You might still see her dot, and if you do, if you feel something just beyond reach, know that not all love stories end. Some just go on, quietly forever. Each night, as the stars took their places and the wind lowered its voice, the moon began her slow ascent. Not just across the sky, but across memory, across longing, across a love that had no witness but the night itself. And beneath her pale light, far from the noise of cities or the songs of temples, there slept a man. His name was Endymyon. No one knows whether he had been a shepherd or a prince. Some say he had eyes the color of still water. Others say he had no name until she gave him one. But all agree on one thing: he slept. And he never woke. He did not sleep because he was tired. He slept because a goddess loved him, Serene, the moon. With her silver chariot and quiet grace, passed over mountains and forests, over rivers and altars, and every night she returned to him, not to speak, not to ask, but simply to be close. Endymion lay beneath an old tree, his body unchanging, breath soft like wind through reeds. Around him the world moved on. Flowers bloomed and withered. Kingdoms rose, burned, and were buried. But he did not stir. Each night, Selene would descend, slowly, carefully, as if not to disturb the hush around him. She would kneel beside his sleeping form and touch his hair, his face, his closed eyelids. And she would look at him not with hunger, not with hope, but with something deeper, with devotion, with ache. Sometimes she cried, not loudly, just a single tear falling onto his cheek where it dried before dawn. Sometimes she brought him gifts, a moonlit feather, a flower that bloomed only at midnight, the scent of a dream stolen from another sleeping soul. He never saw them, and still she came, not once, not twice, but every night through centuries, because that was the only kind of love the gods were allowed to have. One-sided, eternal, filled with what-ifs and nevers. Selene knew that if she woke him, he would belong to time again, to hunger, to age, to forgetting, but asleep. He remained hers. Some say the gods gave him eternal rest as a gift. Others say it was Selene who asked for it, who bargained for his stillness, who chose to love someone she could never truly have, just to keep from losing him. And so, night after night, she repeated the same ritual. She would arrive in silence, kneel in stillness, kiss him gently, and leave before the dawn. Noticed. It was not a love made of poems or passion. It was not sung by bards or carved into stone. It was a quiet thing, a candle that never burned out, even when no one was watching. There are no temples to Endymion, no prayers to Selene for love like hers. But still look at the moon some night, when sleep feels near. If it seems brighter than usual, softer, more like a hand reaching out across darkness, maybe it's her. Maybe she's still watching, still waiting. And maybe, in the quiet part of you, the part that aches without words, you know what that means. You know what it's like to love in silence, to hold something in your chest that never answers back, but never fades. Tonight, as your body softens and the day slips away, think of him, of Endymion, still asleep, still loved, still untouched by anything but a goddess hand. Not every love wakes the world. Some just wait beside it, whispering. Always. In the soft folds of Crete, where myths rest beneath lemon trees and ancient prayers are carried on salt winds, a child was born. Her name would be Ephes, but the world was not ready for Ephes as she truly was. Her father, Ligdus, had declared, long before the birth, that if the child was a girl, she would not be allowed to live. We cannot afford a daughter, he had said, not with cruelty, but with the cold arithmetic of poverty. A girl was a burden. A son was a future. So when Telethusa gave birth after nights of aching silence and whispered fears, she looked down and saw her daughter breathing, tiny, real, and she lied. "She is a boy," she told Ligdus. "His name will be Ephes." And from that moment on, the child grew within two shadows, the one cast by sunlight and the one cast by truth. Ephes ran with the boys, wrestled in dust, climbed fig trees, and spoke with surety. Her voice deepened not with age, but with effort. Her smile became quieter over time, measured. At night, she stared at her own reflection in still water and tried not to wonder what it meant to be seen and yet not known. Years passed, as they do, and one day Ephes saw Ianthe. She wasn't the first girl she had met, but she was the first, one who made Ephes forget to breathe. Ianthe's laughter came not from her throat, but from somewhere deeper. When she walked, flowers seemed to follow. She was grace without knowing it. She was certainty in a world of questions. They were betrothed. Quickly. Two beautiful youths, everyone said. A perfect match. No one knew the ache that bloomed quietly in Ephes's chest. No one noticed how often she stared at the sky, asking questions she could never say aloud. Ianthe dreamed of their wedding, spoke of it with joy. She touched Ephes's hand and told her of the life they would build, simple, quiet, full of garden herbs and shared linens. And Ephes smiled always, but never fully. How do you tell someone that your name doesn't fit inside your bones? That every day feels like borrowed breath. Each step toward the altar felt heavier than the last. Not because Ephes didn't love Ianthe, she did, fiercely, purely, but because love built on silence always threatens to collapse. The night before their wedding, Ephes walked out into the night, barefoot, alone, beneath a sky too vast to hold her grief. She fell to her knees and prayed not for freedom, but for alignment. That her love might no longer be something she had to explain. That the body she lived in might finally become the home she needed. The gods listened, or maybe just one did, Isis, who sees between things. And when dawn came, Ephes rose. Change. No myth says exactly how. The texts speak of transformation, of body meeting spirit. But perhaps the truest miracle was that she no longer had to hide. That her love no longer came wrapped in fear. That when she looked into Ianthe's eyes that morning, she saw not confusion, but recognition. They married beneath a sun that paused as if watching. They held hands like they'd always meant to, and Ianthe never let go. There are many kinds of love in Greek myth. Wild ones, tragic ones, ones that end in storms or stone. But Ephesus and Ianthe's was something else. It was quiet resistance. It was the choice to stay when the world gave no easy answers. And maybe tonight, as your own breath slows and your thoughts soften, you might feel their story near you. Not loudly, just a hush in the dark. A whisper that says, you are allowed to become. You are allowed to love without apology. Because not every story is about heroes or war. Some are about standing still until the world shifts around you. And maybe that's enough. They called her a queen, but before the crown, before the throne, before her name was stitched into palace records and carved into stone, she was simply a woman born into the weight of legacy. Phaedr, a daughter of Minos, king of Crete, sister of Ariadne, who had handed a thread to a stranger and vanished into myth, and child of Pasiphae, whose name carried whispers of magic, of monsters, of forbidden longing. Phaedra had grown up in corridors where every echo told a story, and none of them ended softly. She was married to Theseus, a man twice carved into legend, hero of Athens, slayer of beasts, but also a man who had already loved and already lost. When Phaedra entered his life, she entered not as a beginning, but as a continuation. She knew that. She accepted it. Or tried to. Their palace in Trojan overlooked a restless sea. The air tasted like salt and unspoken things. She tended to gardens, lit lamps at dusk, and walked hallways lined with history that didn't belong to her. Her footsteps left no trace. Her voice rarely echoed that, and then she noticed him. Hippolytus, the son of Theseus, born to another woman. He moved like wind, untamed, indifferent, unwilling to bow. He offered no courtesies, no compliments. He prayed to Artemis, goddess of the hunt, and the moon, and never once left an offering for Aphrodite. Phaedra watched from windows, from shadowed balconies, from behind the half-closed curtain of duty. He wasn't handsome in the way stories often describe, but he was real, earthbound, fierce, quiet, and in a world built of masks and expectations, he was something else entirely. Free. At first, it was curiosity. Then admiration, then something she could not name without her voice breaking. Love, perhaps. Or need, but not the kind that dances in public or sings under windows. It was the kind that lingers like smoke. The kind that makes silence heavier. She tried to bury it. She fasted, prayed, slept facing the wall. But feelings don't obey crowns. And love doesn't vanish when ignored. It grows quiet roots beneath the skin. One day, she spoke, not loudly, not boldly. Just a few words, trembling on the edge of hope. And Hippolytus, with eyes full of fury and disbelief, recoiled. He did not strike her, but he might as well have. His silence thundered, and Phaedra, queen of restraint, unraveled. She did not shout. She did not chase. Instead, she did what so many before her had done in palaces like hers. She turned pain into story. She whispered to a servant. The servant whispered to another. The tale reached Theseus like a blade. He came to me, she said. He tried to. She never finished the sentence. She didn't have to. Theseus cursed his son, called upon Poseidon. The sea god answered. And Hippolytus, proud, chaste, untouchable Hippolytus, was thrown from his chariot and crushed beneath wild horses. Blood on stone. Silence in the palace. Only then did Phaedra speak the real truth, but by then, the weight was too much. She took her own life. Not with spectacle, but with the same quiet that had marked every step of her story. People still argue, was she wicked? Was she wounded? But perhaps she was neither. Perhaps she was just tired. Tired of carrying longing like a secret illness. Tired of being seen only in mirrors, never in eyes. Tired of loving someone who would never look back. Tonight, as you lie in your own quiet, surrounded by softness and shadows, think of Phaedra not as the villain, not as the victim, but as the whisper. Between, the moment before the wave breaks, the breath before the name is spoken. Because some tragedies don't come with fury. They come with a gaze held too long, a truth spoken too late, and a silence that never truly ends. And maybe, in dreams, she walks again barefoot, unseen through corridors that no longer echo. Maybe in sleep, you see her eyes, and maybe they are not angry, only tired. Before the petals opened, before the myth hardened into marble, there was only a boy and a god, and sunlight bending gently over the backs of olive trees. His name was Hyacinthus. He was not a prince. He did not carry a sword. He had no temple, no army, no prophecy carved into his skin. What he had were shoulders browned by the sun, laughter like wind skipping across a pond, and eyes that didn't yet know how to look away. Apollo saw him first, not as a god sees mortals distant, dispassionate, but as someone who had forgotten. He was divine. Hyacinthus did not kneel. He ran, and Apollo followed. They spent mornings tracing constellations into the earth with sticks. Afternoons became music lessons, though the lyre would often go untouched. Apollo would show him how sound became spell, how breath could shape beauty. But Hyacinthus was more interested in chasing birds or skipping stones. He was too young to know how rare it was for a god to wait, and yet Apollo waited. Love is often quietest at its beginning. It rustles like the leaves overhead. It watches. It leans close without touching. Hyacinthus grew older, stronger, His hair fell longer. His hands grew calloused from hunting. But he still turned his head whenever Apollo spoke. Still smiled like everything was new. One day they played a game. A simple thing: discus, sunlight, laughter echoing in a meadow. The air was still. The grass soft. Nothing foretold tragedy. Apollo threw and Hyacinthus ran. Some say the wind changed. Others say the discus was cursed. Still others whisper that Zephyrus, the jealous west wind who also loved the boy, blew it off course. No one knows. No one ever will. The disc struck him. It was a sound like cracked clay. Like a song ending mid-note. Apollo dropped to his knees. Called the boy's name. Once, twice. Hyacinthus opened his eyes. Just barely, and smiled. There were no last words. Just breath. And then stillness. The sun did not dim. Birds still sang. But in Apollo something shattered. He was the god of healing, of prophecy, of harmony. But he could not undo what had been done. He could not find a future where the boy lived. Could not tune time like a lyre string and begin again. So he held him for hours, maybe days. The myths are unclear. Grief, after all, makes time strange. And from the blood in the soil, something stirred. A flower, delicate, purple, curled as if still listening. Apollo named it after the boy, Hyacinth. Each petal bore the marks of sorrow. Etched into its bloom were letters. Some say they spell ai, a cry of mourning. Others say they mean nothing. That the flower simply grew because beauty, like grief, must go somewhere. He could not bring him back. But he made sure the world would remember. Now, when fields awaken in spring, when the air softens and the earth exhales, the hyacinth returns. Small, gentle, unassuming, and yet filled with memory. Tonight, as you lie in stillness, think of Hyacinthus, not as a legend, not as a lesson, but as a boy who ran too fast toward joy, who did not know he was part of a myth, who smiled, even as the world broke, and as sleep begins to draw its curtain. Remember this: not all tragedies come with betrayal or thunder. Some arrive in sunlight. In play. In love that bloomed too soon and stayed behind as a flower. Psyche was not born divine. She had no temple, no thunder at her birth, no prophecy whispered into the wind. She was just a girl, human, quiet, unnamed by the stars. But she was beautiful. So beautiful, in fact, that people stopped bringing flowers to the temples of Aphrodite. They stopped singing her name in prayers. And gods do not tolerate forgetfulness. Aphrodite, slighted and silent, summoned her son. Make her fall, she said. Not in love with disgrace, with a beast, with something beneath even mortals. Let her beauty bring her shame. Eros obeyed. At first, he approached with his golden bow, with his perfect aim and endless charm. But when he saw her, lying there, mortal and vulnerable, something wavered. The arrow shook. And for the first time, Eros missed. He fell. Not from the sky, not from Olympus, but inward into a feeling he did not understand. So he built her a place. A palace without doors, filled with invisible servants and velvet breezes. Food appeared on golden trays. Baths ran themselves. Music floated through the air like perfume. And every night, in complete darkness, he came to her. He spoke in whispers, held her hands in the dark. Do not try to see me, he said. If what you feel is real, trust it. Psyche did. At first, the mystery comforted her. His voice became a landscape, his touch a ritual. Each night she listened. Each morning she waited. But days stretched long without answers. And silence, eventually, feels like absence. Her sisters came to visit. They walked through the invisible walls, gasped at the magic, listened to Psyche's stories, and asked the one question she had tried to bury. How can you love someone whose face you've never seen? They offered fears like gifts. What if he's a monster? What if he's cursed? What if the darkness hides more than a face? That night, Psyche lit a lamp. She waited until his breath grew slow, his hands relaxed, his body softened in sleep. She leaned over him with trembling arms, holding the flame just close enough, and she saw him, a god. Golden, perfect, peaceful. And then, a drop of oil slipped. Touched his shoulder. He woke. Their eyes met, for the first time. And the last, he said nothing, but the silence held the weight of every broken promise. And he vanished, not out of anger, but sorrow. Psyche was left alone, in a palace now empty, in a silence too large for comfort. But she did not give up. She searched for him. Through forests, over mountains, into the mouths of caves. She came to Aphrodite, who greeted her not with forgiveness but with tasks. Trials designed to break. Sort this mountain of seeds. Before nightfall. Fetch water from the river that no mortal can touch. Travel to the underworld. Return with a box that must never be opened. Each test was cruel. Each test she passed, not with strength. With devotion. Because she still believed that love, true love, was not made only of ease. That it could be shaken and survive. That it could lose its way and still return. And it did. Eros found her again. But this time, she did not need to guess. Did not need to ask. She knew who he was. And more importantly, she knew who she was. Gods watched, whispered, wondered. And in time, they granted her wings not of feathers, but of memory. She became immortal. Not because she was flawless, but because she had endured the dark and still chosen to love again. Now, when you close your eyes, think of a girl walking alone in the night, holding a small flame. Think of how even the smallest doubt can set a world on fire. And how, somehow, from ash love can bloom again. Love is not blindness. It is the decision to keep seeing again and again, even when it hurts. You are falling asleep now. And in your dream, there is a room without light. And in that room, a voice that says only, "Do you trust me?" And your answer, soft as breath, is still, yes. She was not a goddess of war, nor of wisdom. No thunder followed her. No statues bore her name. Arethusa was just a nymph, waterborn, quiet, and without ambition. She lived in the forests of Elis, near still pools where deer drank and trees whispered their old green songs. She wanted only to move through the world without being seen. To run, to breathe, to feel the moss under her feet and the wind in her hair. She spoke little, laughed quietly, and when she bathed in the sacred river of Alpheus, she did not expect to be watched. But gods have eyes everywhere. Alpheus was a river god, strong, lonely. He saw her. And in that single moment, when her back was turned, when her hair glistened with silver drops, he decided he loved her. He stepped forward. She heard the sound, a branch breaking, a breath too loud. She looked up. And the world changed. She ran, through trees, over stones, across fields that had never known such speed. She did not scream. There was no time. Only breath and fear, and the sound of footsteps behind her. The sound of something larger than desire. The sound of being chosen without consent. Arethusa was not weak. She was not waiting to be saved. She ran because she wanted to keep something herself. Her own shape, her own silence. But Alpheus did not stop. The earth blurred. The sky vanished behind the canopy. Sweat mixed with river spray. Her heartbeat was the only rhythm she trusted. And when her feet failed her, when the ground felt too near and too far at once, she prayed. Not to love. To ice. To vanish. To dissolve. To become the one thing no hand could hold. Water. And the goddess heard her. The earth cracked open. A fissure deep and cold. And Arethusa fell not in death, but in transformation. Her limbs dissolved. Her skin became ripple. Her voice became current. She slipped through stone and shadow, far beneath the world, into silence. She emerged again. In Sicily. Not a girl now, a spring, clear, flowing, forever. But Alpheus was not finished. He changed too, turned himself to water, followed her beneath the sea, through salt and silence, until their streams met. And so the story ends, with water and water, two rivers intertwined beneath the surface, one fleeing, one following. Even now they say, if you lower a cup into Arethusa's spring in Sicily, and listen closely, you can hear the echoes of a river far away in Greece. And no one knows if it is love or something else entirely. Now as your breathing slows, imagine that moment, the one just before she became water, the one just after the prayer left her lips, the air still trembling with effort, the earth still listening, the fear still warm. Imagine choosing escape so completely that you vanish into the world. Because sometimes survival is not fighting, it is slipping away without sound. And sometimes the most enduring love story is the one where the lover never catches up. It is a quiet story, always. It begins not with music but with silence, a meadow, a bite from a snake, a cry that does not echo. Eurydice falls. Her fingers slip through the grass like mist, and just like that she is gone. The world does not end. The trees still sway, the wind still hums. But something deep inside Orpheus shatters so cleanly that no sound escapes. His lyre grows quiet, his hands still. The songs he once played, songs that made stones weep and rivers pause, are swallowed by grief. He does not write another verse. He does not speak another name. He simply walks, not north, not home, but down to the underworld, to shadows, to silence, to the land where songs do not echo. No one tells him where to go. No one opens the gate, but the dead hear him, and Hades listens. Orpheus does not beg, he plays, he sings, of a woman in a sunlit field, of laughter shared under fig trees, of fingers brushing against stone walls, of absence, of ache, of a love that lingers beyond breath. And for the first time, the king of the dead feels something close to mercy. You may take her back, Hades says, on one condition. You must not look back, not once, until both of you have returned to the world above. Orpheus nods. He understands, but understanding is not the same as obeying. He reaches for her in the dark. Her hand finds his, cold, real, present. And together they walk upward, step by step, through winding tunnels, across rivers that do not flow, past the silent dead and their patient waiting. The path narrows, the light changes, the earth shifts, but she says nothing, and that is the test. Orpheus begins to wonder, is she really there? Is he imagining her steps? Has Hades tricked him? The silence deepens, his breath quickens. The light is so close now. Just a few more steps. But love, when mixed with fear, becomes impatience. He turns, only for a heartbeat, only to be sure, only because he must know. And in that moment, she fades, her eyes meet his one final time, and then, nothing. No scream, no sound, just absence. Again, he stands alone at the edge of the living world, his hand outstretched, empty. He does not sing again. He does not return to the meadow. He wanders, not forward, not backward, just away. And they say, in the hills where he walked alone, flowers bloomed where his tears fell, not because of beauty, but because even sorrow can feed the earth. Now, as you lie in bed, think of that moment, the breath before the turn, the silence between trust and doubt. We always want to look back, but sometimes the bravest thing is to keep walking, even when we cannot hear the footsteps behind us, even when we don't know if love is still following. Close your eyes and let the silence hold you, because sometimes stories are not warnings, they are reminders. To wait one more step and not look back. She never asked to be remembered. Not in stories, not in whispers, not in prayers carved into marble walls. Daphne only wanted to run. That was her sanctuary. Movement, distance, the clean wind between her and the world. She was not cruel, nor cold, just clear. She did not dream of temples or offerings. She did not want her name sung in bathhouses or inked into scrolls. The only sound she ever longed for was the soft hush of leaves underfoot and the breath of wind shifting through. Trees that did not judge or chase. But Apollo was not the wind. He was the sun, relentless, burning, golden with certainty. When he saw her, he did not see a girl. He saw a path he had not yet walked, a prize unclaimed, a story not yet told. He believed that wanting her was enough. That desire, shaped like poetry, could become permission. He was wrong. She felt it before. He spoke, a change in the air, a heat not born of the weather. That old fear, quiet and instinctive. The kind women carry like bone. The sound of footsteps behind you when you hope to be alone. And so she ran, not out of hatred, not out of scorn, but because her body knew what his desire meant. It meant erasure. It meant being turned into a verse, not a voice, through woods. Over streams, across the tangled roots of sacred groves, she fled. Her feet bruised, her lungs tight, her thoughts silent except for one. Away, he followed, not with violence, not with threats, but with beauty. With music. With metaphors wrapped in promises. But even the softest song can still be a cage. Daphne cried out not to Apollo, not to the sky, but to the earth. To her mother, to the deep green gods who speak in roots and sap. She begged not for victory, not for revenge, but for change. For release. For escape. And the earth listened. Her skin cooled. Her legs stiffened. Her arms reached upward, not by choice, but by mercy. Fingers became branches. Hair became leaves. Toes became roots. She did not scream. She sighed. And just like that, she was no longer someone who could be caught. Apollo arrived too late. He reached for her and found bark. He whispered her name, and the leaves trembled not in answer, but in wind. He pressed his lips to the tree's trunk, not knowing if she could feel it. He promised eternal remembrance, that the laurel would be sacred, that poets would wear it, that her story would be told forever. But stories are not peace. He made her into a symbol, a crown, an ending, but she had never asked for that. She had asked for distance, for silence, for space to be left alone. Now, when the wind moves through laurel leaves, it said she still shivers not from cold, but from memory, from the weight of being turned into something she never chose. And somewhere in the roots of that tree, in the quiet center where bark meets soul, she still runs, not in fear, not anymore, but in freedom, because transformation is not always tragedy. Sometimes, it's the only way to remain yourself. Now, as you lie still in your bed and the world softens around you, think of her, the girl who chose stillness over surrender, the one who escaped not by hiding, but by becoming something no one could follow. Your breath slows. Your eyes grow heavy. The leaves outside your window whisper something ancient, something gentle. And if you listen closely enough, you might hear footsteps fade into forest. You might feel bark beneath your skin. You might remember what it means to belong only to yourself. Close your eyes. The sun is far behind, and you are safe in the branches. There is a river in the underworld where memory fades. It does not rush like mortal rivers do. It drifts. It waits. It glides in silence, touching nothing, disturbing nothing. Lethe, they call it. The river of forgetting. The slow unraveling of all that once burned. Here the dead come to drink, not with thirst, but with ache, because the soul, even after death, still carries the weight of love, even the broken kind. Even the kind that never had a name. They say the water is cool, pale as mist. When touched, it does not sting or chill. It simply erases, softly, gently, One moment at a time, a name, a face, a scent clinging to linen, a voice whispered against skin. A goodbye that never came, all gone, and yet, not all souls drink. Some hesitate at the shore. They stand, barefoot, on the edge of forgetting, torn between the relief of release and the quiet loyalty of longing. Because to remember is to suffer, but to forget is to lose the shape of who you were. You may not know their names. The ones who stood at the bank of Lethe and chose silence over sleep. The ones who turned away from the river, cradling their grief like something sacred. They are not heroes, not gods. Just hearts that once beat for another and refused to let. The rhythm died. One was a woman who waited lifetimes for a voice that never returned. She walked the underworld with that name in her mouth like a song no one else could hear. One was a boy who never spoke, but carved her face into the walls of dreams. And one was a god. Yes, even among the divine, some wounds refused to close. He came. With pride, with gold in his hair and thunder on his tongue, but Lethe made no sound for him, no ripples, no welcome, because Lethe does not take. It only offers, and on that day, even the god bowed his head. He cupped the water in his hands. He looked into it, saw her eyes reflected back, not as she died, but as she laughed. And he could not drink. So he stood. And he wept. Because in the end, even eternity is not long enough to forget a true sorrow. Now as you lie here, blanket pulled close, let yourself drift not into forgetting, but into rest. Let the river flow quietly, far away. Let memory soften, like ash blown across stone. Because sleep is not ERSURE. It is a waiting room, a place between pulses, between stars, between stories. And even if the world forgets you, somewhere someone remembers, not your name, but the way you loved, the way you stayed. The way you stood, just once, at the edge of forgetting, and turned away. Good night. Let the water pass. Let the silence hold. And if you dream, may it be of someone who remembered, even when they shouldn't, even when it hurt, even when all the world asked them to forget.